Imagine a world where you can create, explore, and compete with millions without moving out of your room. A world where you can express yourself. You can be a hero, a villain, or anything in between. This is the world of video games. India, a country of over 1.3 billion people, is making its mark in the global gaming industry. From mobile games to console games, the Indian gaming market is rapidly expanding. With the advancement of technologies, the Indian gaming industry is providing a new frontier for creative expression and economic growth. For decades, video games have captured our imaginations and transported us to fantastic worlds of adventure and excitement. But the history of gaming is a story of innovation and evolution. From the early days of computer scientists experimenting with electronic games in the 1950s to the emergence of home consoles and personal computers in 1990s. With each new advance in technology, the gaming industry has pushed the boundaries of what's possible, creating immersive experiences that captivate players around the world.
So the process of game development starts from an idea, of course. Then we go into a pre-production phase where we research what all resources we need, how much time is gonna take, what kind of art style are we going for, what all platforms are we targeting, what all markets we are going to target. That's all pre-production phase where we try to mitigate risks and expand on horizons what we can achieve. That's the pre-production phase. After the pre-production ends, that can last about 3 months to 6 months. After that, we get into the development. Concept art, we start from the concept art, then the art starts coming in place based on the things we did in pre-production phase. After that, the development goes on, and it's a never-ending process which can take anywhere from 1 year to 2 years to 3 years, depending on the scale of the game. If it's a hyper casual game, not many processes are required. But for a mid-core to hardcore or a PC specifically game, you need at least 2 to 3 years for it to develop. After the development, during that time, we start marketing the game, we start talking to publishers, we start taking it out and put it in front of audience, gain as much feedback as we can. We start showcasing it in different exhibitions like GDC, IGDC, or any other conferences. After that, the process of marketing keeps going, the development keeps going. When we are about to release, we reach out to our store managers, we reach out to publishers so that they can help us get the game in front of the audience. And after that, release, of course.
Video games are more than just a form of entertainment. They are a form of art, culture, and expression that can bring people together across borders and boundaries. Video games have become a growing sector in India, competing with the global market and creating new opportunities for innovation and creativity. From coin-operated arcade machines in 1990s to smartphones and consoles in 2020s, India has witnessed a remarkable transformation in its gaming landscape. But what are the factors that drive this growth and innovation? What are the challenges and opportunities that the Indian gaming industry faces in the global market? And how does the Indian gaming culture reflect the social and cultural diversity of the country? In this documentary, we will take a closer look at the history, present, and future of video games in India and explore how they shape and are shaped by the Indian identity.
A massive reform in the sporting sector is now coming in. The Indian government has officially recognized esports in the country. Esports will now be part of the multi-sports events category in India under the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports.
Gaming is no longer just a hobby. It's a serious profession, with gamers competing at the highest level and winning millions of dollars in the prize money. But before we go any further, let's rewind. Who are we making these games for? We went to League of Extraordinary Gamers, popularly known as LXG, which was rated one of the best gaming lounges in India within 6 months of its launch. LXG encourages the Indian esports scene by catering to both professional and casual players. Here we met 4 dynamic players, Arbaz, Ratul, Siddhasham and Sahil, who showed us industry through their perspective.
Rise of gaming, I think I would say it would start off with like events, like communities basically, right? Because all it takes to start a community is 2 people.
In India, it is very big, mainly because it's a young population and a lot of people want to, they don't necessarily have free time, but they need to have a break every now and then. It's not just work, it's not just studies. And sometimes work will just take too much of your time. So you just want to come back home, play a good PC game or mobile game, just chill out. That's, the main appeal of gaming. And the community is so wholesome, which is such a nice thing to see.
I've been to like I've been to like quite a few gaming cafes in Bangalore, but this place, I love it because of the community over here, and I know everybody. I've been coming here for the last like 7 years almost, so I know most of the people over here, and like the games that are played here aren't really available in any other cafe.
It is safe to say that the most valuable part of gaming is the people you are playing it with, the community you are building and the memories you create.
Investors would definitely want to go for the mobile market more, like they would want to invest in that, especially in India, because India is like the second largest mobile market, right, in terms of apps, games. Like, I mean, we kind of like, I think for PUBG, we were like, I think had the highest player base in the world, right? And I think it was just, China and US who are like behind us.
Yeah, I've always been someone who's more inclined to go towards consoles or rather PC. But once in a while, I do feel like some mobile games are pretty good to invest your time in. Like, for example, as I said, I was a Pokemon fan, so I was really into Pokemon Unite and Pokemon Go.
I hate mobile games with a passion.
Why?
Like, I think it's really predatory with how they monetize things. Like, like stuff like there was a Tableau mobile game, and then there was the Pokemon Unite, and these games, they basically just they basically create a barrier to players where the only way to break this barrier is to like actually like pay real money to progress in the game.
Recently, I think the past couple of months, I haven't played a lot of mobile games, and the reason for that is my actual PC is back home, right? So like I moved out of Bangalore like early last year and came back later for a new job. So still looking for a house, so maybe once I get my place, I might give like equal time to both of them, because there are a few mobile games that are also like cross compatible with the PC, and those are the games that I play a lot.
The history of mobile gaming in India can be traced back to the early 2000s, when Nokia phones were popular. Mobile gaming started to take off in India around 2010 to 11. One of India's first popular mobile game was Angry Birds, which was launched in 2010. The game became an instant hit in India and helped popularize mobile gaming among Indian audiences. As the popularity of smartphones increased, so did the demand for mobile games.
ರೈಲು ಈಗ ಹಲಸುವಿಗೆ ತಲುಪಲಿದೆ. ಬಾಗಿಲು ಬಿಡು ಎಡಕ್ಕೆ ಕೈಯಲ್ಲಿ. ರೈಲು ಇಳಿಯುವ ಮುನ್ನ ಅಂತರದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ.
In recent years, many users have played games on their smartphones. Today, most of the popular games in India, including Free Fire, PUBG Mobile, Call of Duty Mobile, and Candy Crush Saga, are played on their mobile phones. The dynamic world of game development is where innovation, creativity, and technology come together to create experiences that captivate and entertain players around the globe. Game developers and founders drive this industry, pushing boundaries and bringing new ideas to life in ways that captivate audiences of all ages. We went to IGDC, Indian Game Developers Conference in Hyderabad. It is an annual conference that brings together game developers, designers, artists, and other professionals in the gaming industry in India. The conference provides a platform for participants to learn from experts, share ideas, and network with others in the same industry. After talking to players, we got to know what type of games they want the Indian developers to make. Now, it was the turn to talk to the people who actually make games for these people. We met some game designers and developers in IGDC and spoke to them about the games in India.
In game is divided in 2 aspects. One is visual and second is like मैकेनिक्स. सो आप जो गेम के अंदर आप जो कुछ भी देखते हो विजुअली वो 3D पार्ट में आता है, यानी कि मैं 3D कैरेक्टर आर्टिस्ट हूँ. गेम के अंदर जो भी विजुअली आप देखते हो वो 3D पार्ट होता है. एंड हाउ यू कंट्रोल योर गेम, like how you control your characters and everything, that comes in like mechanics part or development part. So जो भी आप देखते हो वो हम बनाते हैं.
Gaming is the only form of entertainment which involves a two-way process. Unlike passive forms of entertainment such as watching a movie or reading a book, gaming requires active participation from the player. The player interacts with the game world, makes decisions, and influences the outcome of the game. To make a successful game, there is a sheer need to understand the audience. We spoke to people from some of the most successful gaming companies in India to know how do they go about making a game for the Indian audience and what are the things they keep in their mind while making a game.
We started out, and this is when I was looking to take a leap into this industry as a career. The biggest challenge was convincing my family that there is a career to be had in games, where right now it's still a lot more advanced in terms of where the industry is, in terms of where the awareness is. People understand that, you know, even if you're not just related to the games industry in making a career while making games, there are other ways of making a career in the games industry, like a journalist, like a streamer on YouTube, or like an esports athlete. So there's a lot more awareness. But when I started out, the biggest challenge for me was just figuring out a way of convincing my family that there was a career to be had in games.
I was very fortunate to have parents who supported my gaming hobby when I was a kid. So when I was 6 years old, my parents got me a Nintendo. That was way back in 94. I grew up playing games, and they never stopped me from playing games, and that's why I got into game development. That's what I did my whole life. I just played games.
Indian gaming industry perhaps is not like what we see in countries like US, Japan and China. Not all games do work out in India. There are a lot of games which have done extremely well everywhere around the globe, but India. One of the elements that attract Indian players is multiplayer games. Multiplayer games offer an engaging and social way for Indians to interact with each other, compete and have fun.
Think about it this way. If you want to write a good book, you need good penmanship, right? If you want to create a great song, you need great writing plus great musical, music and melody, and plus you need great performance of whatever the song was. If you need to create a movie, you need all of these audio things, penmanship, all of the stuff we mentioned with the song. On top of that, you need acting, performance, cinematography, lighting, and a whole bunch of other things. When we are making a game like ours, we need all of this and interactivity, where the fundamental difference between any other medium of entertainment and games is that all other mediums of entertainment are one way in terms of their communication about how a player interacts with all of those things.
From anyone else? Are they the same or are they different? And so we went to sort of tier 2 and tier 3 cities to sort of do research on this, and you could consider it like an ethnographic study where we just sort of sat there and observed people playing. We didn't ask anyone directly how are you different from anyone else? Because I don't think anyone can answer. But by watching people just, enjoy or like play games organically, like naturally, as if you weren't there, is where you get a proper understanding. And for us, what that meant was sort of going into people's homes and sort of just chilling, just relaxing, hanging out with them, and like watching, kids play. Really,
even I think it's a very experimental ground at the moment. Everyone is trying to figure out what will work in India and what will not work. Ludo has worked great because I think there's a social aspect to it. There are multiple players, you can just pick it up with another friend. So and we grew up playing a lot of Ludo and those board games. So that's why it's popular.
Right now, if you look worldwide in any of the big economies, right, The games as a medium of entertainment is the largest medium of entertainment. It's 3 times the size of movies, music and books combined in markets like US and Japan and China and Europe. And the same is going to happen in India, right? And there's a very simple reason for that, which is multiplayer games. The same thing I was alluding to, where if you put 100 crore rupees in building a Bollywood movie, you get 3 hours worth of high value entertainment. If you put 100 crores in building a multiplayer game, you technically get infinite hours worth of high value entertainment.
Just as an outsider looking in, and I feel that gives me somewhat of an advantage to be give it a detached view on sort of user behavior in India or gamer behavior. But people tend to sit in the same room as one another and pull out their phones and play games together. And we thought that was a rather profound observation, because I mean, me growing up, I grew up with games consoles, and my idea of social gaming was like to sit on the couch and have 4 controllers and play a game of Mario Kart or something. But what we observed was, when people were playing PUBG or BGMI or whatever the latest game is, they would sit around the same room with their mobile phones and they would play together over the internet. So what we think is the key difference, or what we believe is the key difference, is you have to games that work in India facilitate local play. They have to be more enjoyable for people to sort of sit across the room from one another, and it has to be very easy for them to sort of join a game together and jump in.
Hyper casual has sort of picked up its pace over the past 3 years now. We've been working in its in its spectrum for the past 11 years now, so we've got a lot of knowledge when it comes to it. Why we have not ventured out into PC and console earlier? The answer to that question is because mobile games are something that holds a lot of potential, and especially Southeast Asian market, US, UK, Canada, the Western market. People are very much willing to spend a lot of money in these games, and hence PC and console, those sort of games, they take like a year or maybe 1.5 years to develop, whereas a hyper casual game that would take us about 7 days.
Casino games have always been a part of Indian culture. Traditional games like Teen Patti and Rummy have been played in homes across India for generations, and these games have now evolved into online versions that are accessible to a wider audience. The internet has made it easier than ever for people to access casino games online, which has led to a surge in popularity of this genre. The other reason is online casino games now offer Indian rupees as a currency option and provide games that are specifically designed to appeal Indian players.
We see a lot of Teen Patti and Rummy kind of card games, very popular in India. But I think we'll slowly start seeing more and more mid-core and hardcore games being more popular as the gamers evolve.
In terms of what we get out of content from a great game as a medium of entertainment is much higher compared to any other medium of entertainment that's out there, whether it be books, movies, music, right? And the other big thing that we've seen in India is that there is this trend of obviously everybody knows about Jio, UPI and Jan Dhan, where people now have bank accounts. It's easier to do transactions, right? India is 40% of the world's digital transaction volume as of today right now.
India is at a very nascent stage. We just started getting into games. Teenagers these days have mobile phones, and a lot of gamers in India, their first gaming device was a mobile phone, not on PC or console. But whereas in Japan and China, you will see they will have at least one console at their home, be it Nintendo or any PlayStation or Xbox.
On top of that, we have the cheapest data rates in the world. But specifically for our industry, in the last few years, the big swing in manufacturing in India that has happened because of the production linked incentives that the government has made available for phone manufacturers in the country. It has made India the second largest phone manufacturer in the world right now.
We have different options from very cheap to very high segment. So we have a lot more devices which are easily obtainable. It's not like Xbox, which is specifically for gaming. So I see a lot of Indian gamers starting their gaming journey from the mobile device.
After speaking individually to both players and developers, we observe that there is a clear gap between what players want and what developers are making. Most of the most popular games in India are all made by foreign developers. According to the developers, their 95% target audience is outside India because they are not able to cater much to the Indian audience. We showed our developers some clips of players to take their perspective and try to understand this gap.
I just have very contrary takes, I guess, but let's just try.
When we asked the players what type of games they want the Indian developers to make, they had a lot to say.
So I should just play from here?
Yes. People didn't like 4G. What is the reason behind it? If according to you, like, people like PUBG, but the game that was made by the Indian developers for the Indian audience, they didn't like it.
I feel the answer is rather simple for that. It's because people saw it as a rip-off. They're like, this is just a PUBG rip-off. Why would you make this? I would rather, the movie Gajni? Yeah. I would rather see a game about Gajni because it was much more interesting. Even though it exists, it would be an interesting concept. Like it can be a Yakuza-style game, which is really cool. But you sadly don't see that kind of development in India. I think the only Indian developer which I read, and their game was Raju or Raji. That one I enjoyed because it was very unique. It used Indian mythology. Yes. But sadly, it wasn't that advertised here. I don't think a lot of Indians know about Raji, sadly.
I think marketing plays honestly such a huge factor. Like, it honestly plays like, I wouldn't say it's the only factor, but like it's like said 70% of the factor. If you look at like games like Cyberpunk, it was marketed so heavily. Yeah. And the reason why once it was marketed so heavily, literally everyone's pre-ordering the game. And then you look at these indie games, it's like it's not obviously not that heavily being marketed. So I think that's kind of the reason why I didn't play it. Like, nor did I really see it being exposed, like big let's say influencer really picked up these games and like really showed it out. So I think that's kind of marketing is a huge reason why I played it.
It's like how China does things. Like they copy World of Warcraft, they make their version. They make League of Legends, they copy that, they make their own version. So I don't want Indian development to do that. I want them to make something unique because it's not necessarily like if they want to make a first-person shooter, go for it. But they can use Indian historical events. For example, Call of Duty is based on a lot of historical events like World War II. I don't think a lot of Indians know about that. That's why, and I think
even if they did know about Raji, how would they play it? How would they afford it? Because it was like a $14 game. That's not something like everyone can buy. Raji was like an example of how you take Indian themes and market it globally.
I think we are at a very nascent stage. If we compare to Japan, Japan has a long history of games. If we go back, the whole Nintendo, which was established in 70s, and like the kind of games they were making back in 80s, we are nowhere close to that kind of a gaming is inbred in them because there's a whole community of players who have evolved playing those kind of games. We don't have anything like that in India, and we never had a gaming subculture in India, but we see that culture in Japan, in China, in Western countries.
Slapping sort of Candy Crush with samosas and kachoris is not going to cut it. You want to play the best version of the game. Like, as somebody from the UK, I'm not going to play Candy Crush with tea and crumpets. Like, it means nothing to me. I want to play the best. So another sort of misconception, I think, is that the Indian gamer wants shallow experiences, or they don't know about they're not trained on game genres, so you can't sort of make games that are too complex for the Indian market. I think that's also complete bunkum. As proven, I think, in recent years with complex games reaching the top of the charts. There is a big core gaming audience here that is totally able to learn and do really well in esports even.
You know, funny thing, he mentions, 4G is a ripoff of PUBG and that's why it did not work. And then mentions, I would have played a game on Gajni. Maybe he doesn't know Gajni is a remake of this another movie called Memento as well. So, and then he mentioned that they should have made it like Yakuza, which is a remake of GTA style games.
Players' concerns suggest that they anticipate the best from the designers and developers. A gamer will naturally have high expectations from the creators, whether an Indian indie developer or a foreign studio. Similar storylines and concepts promote repetitive content which audiences completely dislike.
In this particular video, he spoke about 4G, and the 4G was very differently placed. Like, it was released and planned to release right at the time when the game was when PUBG was banned in India. So it was actually marketed to capitalize on the market at that time, which created a gap when PUBG was banned. In that case, I think developers didn't have that much time or the resources, so things didn't go according to plan, according to them. I have spoken to the developers. They wanted to create a big game, but unfortunately, they didn't have the time and the resources that was required to reach to higher level, to kind of level that PUBG is made.
So, in India, we definitely are a very open market in terms of access. So, the games that are available they're right up there in caliber with what we had in the past. In fact, they've definitely gotten better, right? But if your question is around, is there the same level of depth in Indian game developer ecosystem to create games of these caliber? So we aren't there yet, right? So we're still a pretty young industry. The other industries have had a 40-year head start over us, where the US has had and Japan have had games industry since the late 70s, early 80s. So they have a big head start on us. We're just catching up.
We have seen a lot of Western studios being successful in India. Look at Clash of Clans, look at Clash Royale, look at PUBG. We have so many examples who are at the top charts, and not any Indian studios, and they are not targeted specifically for the Indian audiences. They are targeted and made for the Western audience, which just happened to be a great game. So that automatically, is picked up by a gamer in India, irrespective of whether it is Indian themed or not.
Good games take time to get recognition. As a developer working in India with limited capital and resources, creating a game that matches the caliber of abroad will be challenging to develop. Since the Indian video game industry continues to thrive, it is unfair to compare it to the well-established and successful gaming studios of the West.
I think you have to realize as a developer in India, your competition, like India is not a closed market, it's an open market. You're competing with the best, and when you're marketing, you also have to compete with the best marketers in the world, right? So I think I would disagree. I've seen some really clever and good marketing happen from some top players in the gaming industry, but the product they're advertising isn't the best, and that's why they fail, right? If you think about it, like, marketing is just getting the word out. If you have a great product, it markets itself. If you look at the best games that have launched in history, they didn't grow on marketing budgets. They grew organically. They grew through referral.
Indian gamers spend an average of 8.5 hours per week on mobile games. In financial year 22, time spent on top mid-core games is approximately double that of top casual games, with Free Fire leading the pack with average of 109 minutes spent per user per day.
So there is sort of a silver lining here, like mid-core games, FPS games, these are money makers in India because because the population is so big, there is a big sort of cohort of highly engaged really die-hard gamers out there.
Our goal and our thinking is very simple, where we realize that there are more than 600 million gamers in India, out of which 350 million gamers play action games like PUBG, Free Fire, etc. So those 350 million, that's my target market.
India also has a vibrant game development scene, with hundreds of game studios and several international game companies operating here. But this success story is not without its challenges.
We can make something which is for Indian made, but it's also, we have to look at, will it sell? Does the Indian audience have that buying power to actually buy a $5 upfront cost, a premium game? But a US market has that, you know, ability to purchase a $5 game. But in India, where the average income is not that high compared to any Western countries. So that's where the other challenge comes in, that how do we place the product, how do we sell the product in India?
Anybody with $150 rupee phone or about 12,000 rupee phone in India should be able to play a game, should be able to understand the game. At least majority of Indians should be able to understand the game. And what we realize that the big gap we are seeing in the Indian market right now is around the representation of Indianness inside of games. What I mean by that is, can you imagine India today where we only watch Hollywood movies, right? That's the state where we are in with games, right? India's identity is not complete without its movies on the global stage also now. So we also dream of a day where India's global identity will not be complete without its games.
A lot of our games are also not known in India, that the kind of games that we make. We have more of a Western audience, like 40% of our, 50% of our users are US audience. India doesn't even comprise 1% of it. I think the major lack of, I think, marketing on our end as well.
Spending on games is, I guess maybe I think the average consumer is smart, right? And they see ROI versus spending on a game versus spending elsewhere. But there is a definite increase in like a core audience in India who do spend a lot, not just on casino games, but on like what we would call mid-core games.
Any developer who wants to start a studio in India at this point, it's very hard for them to crack international market. We have limited market, like as in we don't have local audiences, as in who play hardcore or mid-core games. Yes, we have developers who have succeeded in India, but those are the kind of games that are successful in Western markets as well. They are big IPs or that are already established. Like let's say we take an example of Clash Royale or Clash of Clans, or we take company like Supercell, who is very successful abroad, is also successful in India. So I think for the local developers to create something very successful for the global market, it's very hard for Indian developers to compete in terms of the kind of resources they have, the kind of money they have. For an Indian studio to start from scratch, it's just not feasible for them to sustain for very long if they don't have any recurring income which is coming in.
Today, the majority of Indian gamers play on mobile devices, and the country has emerged as one of the largest mobile gaming markets in the entire world. However, the Indian gaming industry faces major challenges as it competes with the global market.
We need something unique for the global audience to stand out. We don't, like as mentioned in the video, that people are not interested in seeing cloned games or a copy of games. We don't want to be copy who just copies games. We should be targeting for global audience. We should be targeting for unique games. Though it's very hard. It's easier said than done because, as I said, our gaming industry is at a very nascent stage. We have fewer resources. We have developers, but there's a limited pool. We don't have that kind of pool available who have years and years of experience. If you look at any AAA industry, it took them about 30 years to establish themselves. If you look at GTA 5, it took them about, so the first GTA I think was released in 97, 96, 97, somewhere 97, 98. And if you look at from GTA 1 to GTA 5, there has been a development of 25 years. I think the lack of experience, look at their industry which started way back in 80s. It took them about 40 years to reach at this point. And look at where our industry is at the moment. We are the first generation of gamers who grew up playing games are now into making games out of passion and not just because of money. Over there it's very opposite, which is like they are like 30, 40 years ahead of us. So we have to catch up to them while they are progressing even faster than us, because they have the resources.
As a game designer, the main challenge is to create a new features or a unique selling point for the game. So as you can see in the game, there are multiple games available on the Play Stores. So what makes your games unique standing from the other games? So you have to figure out and what like you can say what are the selling points or why your game should be played by other people. So you have to create like think of the mechanics or features on any particular aesthetic or art style for that game.
So that's where the challenge also comes in for the Indian developers to crack a segment which is not very comparable to the already released games which are out there.
Fun is the fundamental piece that cannot be negotiated away in games. Irrespective of how much ever local representation you might add or make it novel by telling a new story, but if it's not fun, it's not going to work out.
I think it's just finding the signal in the noise. There's a lot of people have opinions about what the Indian gamer wants, and most of it's wrong. I don't think the Indian gamer wants to race like a Tata car. They want to race like a Lamborghini. Like, who doesn't want to race the fastest car? You want to be a millionaire, you want to live the dream the same way anyone else does, and that's what games do best when they're delivering. Like what games are best delivering on, right? So I think when you're building for India, you need to throw out all your preconceptions and just build a game which is as good as it can possibly be, that not just people in India will love, but people all around the world will love.
One of the major challenges for the Indian gaming industry is capital. Game development requires significant investment, and securing funding can be a daunting task for the developers.
We try to mitigate risk. As an Indian indie developer who is completely bootstrapping, we always try to mitigate our risk. Just targeting an Indian audience at this point will be very risky for us. So it makes sense for us to target an Western audience. If it's successful, then create an Indian version out of it. Or maybe we're just waiting for that one success which is out of the box success in India, and then we can surely make one Indian, just Indian targeted game.
It's we have more of a scientific approach here. It's a combination of what's working and where the gaps are. So you can call it like an innovation dilemma in a way. Like, if you're trying to design a game that does too many things new, the chances of that game failing are so much higher because you have to prove so many new things. And the gaming is an interesting space where the person who innovates the most usually fails because somebody looks at your game and improves upon it, and then that game succeeds. The one that really finds the key mechanic and polishes it up. So as a new game developer, you have to really decide what your tolerance level is of like what is the innovation and what is the stuff that people are already super familiar with.
For the Indian market, we never specifically tried to target Indian audience specifically, because we believe that a good game is a good game irrespective of any theme that you put in. So we never tried to target specifically Indian audience, so we never faced a challenge into that. But yes, our games could have been more popular in India. We could have done things in a different way. We could have marketed more in India, which we have learnt and which we are going to do with our future games.
Games talk back to you. So we have to constantly think about how do we think about feedback. And feedback is at the heart of our entire creative process, right? How do we embody feedback in a meaningful, interesting way for players, so that it's constantly there and they get reminded of being part of a virtual world by things people are doing, right? For something as simple as, if you hit a person, walk into a person on the road, वो पलट के आपको बोलेगा अबे अंधा है क्या, right? Something as simple as that, right? So that's called what you see is what you get philosophy, where there is no larger hidden meaning behind whatever you are seeing in that virtual world. Versus then there is another deeper layer of games which we call RPG games, where you might have say magical spells or some fantastical things that are not similar to what you see in your real life. So those things you have to explain to the player, okay, what does this do? Player has to learn it, understand it, what its implications are, all of that. So we think very strongly about where the market and the audience is in terms of what kind of products they are looking at. And the other thing we look at is feedback.
Another challenge is the lack of skilled game designers in the country. While there are some schools that offers game design courses, the industry is still in its infancy and there is a shortage of experienced professionals.
4 fundamental pillars of running a modern game right now, that is art, product, engineering and design, right? So art is everything to do with whatever is visual in the game. Product is everything to do with business in the game. How do you run live operations, look at analytics, make sure you're making money out of the game. Engineering is to do with all the software bit, right? So these 3 things, we have phenomenal talent across the board, right? Design is where I think we are still slightly far behind.
The biggest challenge or limitation is in India, the skill set that is required for gaming or the talent is like really low. It is very concentrated. The game development part can be like if you see outside of India, there are studios which develop AAA games like Call of Duty or Last of Us. You might have heard of all of them, God of War. So these games have really a lot of depth to them, and India is typically a hyper casual market with games like poker or snooker where the game depth is like it's not that great. So finding talent has been pretty hard for us.
See, let me give you a couple of insights on that, right? So number one is technology penetration. For example, India almost skipped over 3G altogether, right? So we went from 2G directly to 4G, right? That was because by the time 3G actually came to India, it was already a mature technology and 4G was already coming. But India grew at such a rapid pace that 4G just took over, right? The same thing has happened between mobiles as well as PC infrastructure in India as well. That mobile phones, because of their price points, because of their accessibility and their use cases, are a lot more popular and have sold a lot more than mobiles and PCs. The Western countries, specifically the US and Western Europe, not Eastern Europe, there's a big difference between the two. What's happened there is the technology maturity there has specifically with infrastructure has been has happened quite some time back. So they had laptops before we even could think of laptops, right? They had desktops, like high-end desktops, gaming PCs, before we could even think of PCs out. So that's the key difference here. I think that when we look at gamers, we always think of them as, okay, they'll be sitting at a PC and they'll be playing game, but that actually is not the truth. I mean, if you go to even a tea stall, right, you'll see people on the side playing games and they are as good gamers. They've got the same reflexes, they've got the same intent, they've got the same let's say concentration while they're playing the game that a PC gamer or a console gamer would really have. So it's really where we are at with price points, really where we are at with our technological maturity and such. That's really how the how the entire landscape of gaming is shaping up in India specifically. In fact, if you look at the same numbers across the globe, mobile is growing much faster than anything else because it's, gaming is something that you do as a leisure activity. It falls under the entertainment genre. So when you're in an Uber, when you're in a, when you're waiting for a meeting and things like that, that is when you pull out your phone and you start playing. Whereas if you have to be a gamer, you have to go home, you have to sit next to your laptop or your PC and then start gaming and then, take it for that long haul.
Despite these challenges, the Indian gaming industry continues to grow, and mobile gaming remains a popular pastime for millions of people.
Time spent will definitely be more on mobiles and makes it more accessible, and time spent on PCs is more for the hardcore people who really want to get into it and use that or spend a lot of time of their life in that specific thing. That is where PCs will really go in. But we've actually experienced the same across mobiles as well. I mean, for example, me, I actually spend about 6 hours per day on the mobile playing games. So yeah, I mean, you get all sorts of people, but yeah, I guess it's just the day and age. That's
So it's very simple. Every nascent gaming market will have 3 kinds of genres that always win: platformers, racers, shooters. If you looked at your history in terms of what games you've played in the past, most likely you played one of these 3 games as your first set of games. India is a very young gaming market, so you'll always see these 3 games taking off. FPS is obviously a national thing. These are things that you can't do in real life, which is why these things really take off. And that's the market that we've been building for the last 7-8 years. Made a shooter called Masgun that's been downloaded 65 million times, and one of the first FPS games built out of India.
I mean, if you have a population of billions of people, that makes a big enough sort of cohort of people who just are the core gamers, and if you can market your games right, you can find them. But in order to find them, you need to sort of filter out all the rest. So yeah, there is sort of a silver lining here, like mid-core games, FPS games. These are money makers in India because because the population is so big, there is a big sort of cohort of highly engaged, really die-hard gamers out there.
Each market has its own unique abilities and unique challenges. Like for example, the number 1 game in US right now is Fortnite, right? You play that on a PC with you need a great stable online connection to be able to play it all the time. But that game has not taken off in India yet because the base fidelity of graphics that it provides and the base sort of level where it runs, it still requires a fairly high-end machine for you to be able to run it.
So what I do think though is that Indian developers have their own strengths. Well, developers in India have their own strengths. And I think a lot of that is sort of connected to sort of moving fast, failing fast, trying lots of things, innovating a lot. Because there's simply just no fear, but also there's maybe not so much patience either. So I think you'll find developers sort of take more of a shotgun approach than a sniper approach to development. What Indian developers in India do well is innovation and try and push the boundaries on new genres, new categories. What they don't do so well is focus and try and polish just one very, very well done game. The global market right now is in an interesting place because it's gotten very slow. And the amount of experimentation, the amount of new genres that we're seeing hitting the market are sort of dwindling. I think India is a great place for experimentation. And if there's going to be any crazy new mechanics or like new game types or genres that emerge, I think it's going to be from India or its neighbors because the risk appetite here is a lot more and people have just less to lose versus sort of international game development companies who can't really afford to take risk.
Here we come to the end of our journey, exploring an industry that is rapidly evolving and growing at an unprecedented pace. From mobile gaming to esports, Indian gamers are exploring a variety of platforms and genres. As the industry continues to grow, we expect to see more innovative games and technologies being introduced to cater to the diverse needs of Indian gaming community. But amidst all the excitement, there are also challenges that the industry needs to overcome. From the lack of infrastructure to the issues of regulation, there are several roadblocks that need to be addressed to ensure a sustainable growth of the Indian gaming industry. We can only imagine what the future holds for the Indian gamers and the gaming industry as a whole. As the Indian gaming industry evolves, it will be interesting to see how it adapts to the challenges it faces and how will it compete with the global market. One thing is for sure, the passion for gaming in India is here to stay. And for the developers of India, the journey has just begun.